Well, welcome to another chat with Tim. And we've been working our way through the psychological stages of development that have been developed by Erik Erikson for a child's development, and really focusing on the fact that if the right conditions are met in a child's life as they're developing, then certain key building blocks are established in their life. And that enables them to succeed in life. That enables them to do well in life because the right foundation is there. And so there's a whole bunch of good, favorable outcomes that come at critical stages in a child's development if the right conditions are met. But if they're not met, then something isn't able to develop that should. And as a result, unfavorable outcomes take place. And we've seen that this is so important because what disrupts the development of a child at critical stages is usually complex trauma. And as a result of that, the child then has deficits. The child then doesn't learn the tools they should. The child then doesn't develop the way that they should, and they have to adapt. And those adaptations later cause all kinds of problems in life. And so part of recovery for most people isn't just learning a bunch of tools that are standard for everybody, though there's an element of that. It's going back to that stage where the growth was disrupted, where they were wounded, and healing that, learning the tools that needed to be learned, learning how to meet the needs that weren't met. That becomes such a critical part of recovery. And so we've been looking at each of the stages and what should have happened and what happens if it's disrupted. And today I want to come to the fifth stage, which is called the transition years, which is your teen years, your adolescence years. And the crisis is called identity versus confusion. And so if you think of a child in the teen years, this is when they are really getting to know themselves. So as a child gets to know themselves a bit because they are playing, exploring, trying all kinds of things, hundreds and hundreds of different things, learning from failure, learning what they're good at, learning what their personality is, learning what they enjoy. And that's really key within the playtime, the young years of a child. And then as they get into their teen years, there's still a whole bunch of exploration and play that is happening, but it gets a little bit more focused. So now they're taking on part-time jobs, after-school jobs. They're specializing in courses at school. They're getting involved in sports or drama or music or all kinds of different hobbies and recreational activities and extracurricular activities. And as they're doing that, they are beginning to get a clear sense of, this is who I am. This is the career that I think I'm suited for. And if they're able to do that, it's like they come to this place of peace with themselves, a settledness that settles in that, okay, this is what I'm about. This is my purpose. This is where I'm going. This is who I am. And that's key for a child's development. But what happens if that doesn't happen? They don't know who they are. There's a discontent. They're unsettled because they don't know what they want to do. They don't know who they are. And that comes out of complex trauma, and that does so much damage. So if I can just back it up a little bit, one of the things that I hear all the time from the people that I work with that are coming out of complex trauma, and they could be 30, 40, 50, 60, and they spent their years in survival mode, their years in maladaptations, wearing masks, fawning, people-pleasing, being aware of what everybody else wants of them, but they don't know who they are. They don't have a clue what their personality is. And it reminds me of the story I heard of the young musician who he learned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs by other people. And somebody asked him one day, why don't you write your own song? And he thought, that's a good idea. And he tried to write his own song, but he couldn't because he didn't know who he was. He knew who everybody else was. He knew everything about everybody else. He knew their passions. He knew what made them tick, but he didn't know what made him tick. So he couldn't write his own song. And that's what happens when this critical time in the teens is disrupted, is you just can't write your own song. You don't know who you are. Somebody has said this, and I think it's so critical to understand. So a child in trauma, they adapt in order to survive. So they might be an introvert, but in order to survive, they have to act like an extrovert because the extroverts are popular. The family validates extroverts. So, and then they might have to be really, really funny, even though they're quite serious. And so they do all of these adaptations. And what happens when they've done all of these adaptations, they begin to think that the adaptations are their personality. But it's not. So somebody has said trauma decontextualized is in a person looks like personality. They might find out later they're not an extrovert, they're an introvert. They're not a easygoing, funny person. They're quite serious, but they didn't know that because of the trauma and what they had to do to survive. But then somebody has said this, that trauma decontextualized in a family. So a family adapts in order to try and take care of the narcissist parent, the abusive authority. It starts different dynamics within the family. And so that gets called family traits. Oh, that's just the way our family is. No, it's not. It's what your family had to do to survive. But then they expand it further and they say trauma decontextualized in a people looks like a culture. And so you go to certain cultures and go, oh, that's just the way they are. No, that's the way for generations they had to survive the abuse within government, the abuse within institutions, racism, etc., that started traits that look like culture. And so what happens, bottom line, with trauma is that you have to adapt in ways that you begin to think is the real you, or it's the way your family is, or it's the way your culture is, but it's not. It's a set of survival habits, survival practices that aren't the real you. And so part of recovery is going back and figuring out, who am I? And so it's really beginning to figure out, okay, this is all the stuff I did to survive. Let's deconstruct that and begin to figure out who I am. And if you do that, it begins to create this peace inside of you, this contentment that has not been there for years and years and years. So how do you do that? What does it look like? Well, to me, it's giving yourself permission almost to go back and be a child. Because what did a child do to get to know themselves? Well, for the first 20 years of their life, basically, play, explore, try lots of things, learn from failure. And so you try one thing and you go, no, don't like it. Try another thing. Oh, I'm really good at this. I really like this. And you just keep trying until you figure out your personality. And then you try different social things and friendship things. And you begin to learn kind of how you communicate best, that where you resonate with people the most, the depth of communication you like, how you think. All of that is gradual self-discoveries. Greater self-awareness keeps coming and coming as you go through all of these experiences. But the broader those experiences are, the greater insight you get into who you are. And so what you're basically doing 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, is going back and saying, I'm going to give myself permission to explore, to try new things. I'm going to try new skills, try new hobbies. I'm going to travel. I'm going to put myself in different social settings, and you'll get to know yourself. Now, what you have to understand is a couple things. Number one, don't expect that you're going to figure out who you are in a day or a week. It took a child 20 years. It's going to take you a while. Now, you're going to be able to condense that time a little bit because you're older and you've already gone through some life experiences. But understand it's going to take time, and be patient with the process, and realize that self-awareness, self-discovery is something that happens gradually. That's okay. So just sit in some of this unknown and realize that that's okay to do that. But secondly, understand that it's going to trigger fear. As you try different things, as you do different things, as you explore, as you play, you're going to trigger guilt. Oh, I'm being lazy. I'm being childlike. Or, oh, I'm going to look stupid. Or I might fail. That's terrible. It's going to trigger shame. So you have to walk through fear, all kinds of triggers, as you get to know yourself. That is so critical. But there's another piece that you need to be aware of here, and that is you need to be with safe people in this discovery. So what's happened for many people is the reason they don't know themselves is because family, close friends, they were the ones that were criticizing them. They were the ones that were trying to force them to follow a certain path in life. They were the ones that didn't validate them, didn't encourage them, didn't give them permission to try different things. They had to work all the time. They were in survival mode all the time. And so because of that, the people in their life didn't provide the environment that was safe for them to get to know themselves. And so now, if you're trying to get to know yourself with those people still as your intimate relationships, what you're going to find is they're still going to criticize you. They're still going to try to say, no, you should be over here. And for them, it might be because it's got more status if you're over here. Whereas if you want to do this, in their mind, no, that doesn't have enough status. And so you might have to set boundaries with the very people that are closest to you biologically, because they are the ones that prevented you from getting to know yourself and will still prevent you from getting to know yourself. But if you set boundaries with them, that's going to trigger a whole bunch of stuff. You're going to feel disloyal. They're going to get upset with you. They're going to think you're turning on them. You're going to accuse you of thinking you're better than them. All kinds of different dynamics are going to happen that are going to be conflict, tough. There's going to be some pushback that isn't fun, but you have to be able to create a safe space for yourself to get to know yourself. So just be aware of those things. So beyond just trying and exploring, I encourage people to take personality tests. So there's common ones, Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram. Now there's some newer ones that are out. What I find is when people take them initially in recovery, they usually end up thinking the personality test says that you're this way, but it's really just all their adaptations. It's not their true personality. So I usually get them to take it a year or two later. And what they find is often it's quite different because they've been able to let go of some of those coping strategies, some of those survival tools. They've come to accept who they are, get to know themselves a little bit better, who they truly are. And so they get quite a bit different result, or a little bit different result. But they can be very helpful in beginning to validate who you truly are, understanding who you truly are, accepting who you truly are. So personality tests basically are looking for certain characteristics. So the first is introversion or extroversion. So do you get your batteries charged most by being alone or with people? So an introvert, being with people too much drains them. They need to be alone to get their batteries charged. An extrovert being alone too much drains them. They need to be with people to get their battery charged. So nobody's a pure pure introvert. Most of us are a blend of that. But it's helpful to begin to understand that if I'm an introvert, I need time alone, but I still need connection with people. So I need to have time alone, but still have good connection. And extrovert, I need connection, but I can't just be with people all the time. I need to learn to connect with myself and have time alone. So a personality test is focusing on, are your tendencies towards introversion or extroversion? Then they focus on kind of your emotional makeup and your intellectual makeup. So how does your thinking influence your emotions? How does your emotions influence your thinking? Which tends to dominate? Are you more of a logical person or more of an emotion? You feel emotions on your sleeve. Your emotions are right out there. Or do you naturally go to your head to think about stuff? And then how do you learn? Are you an visual learner, an audio learner? Do you learn by doing? How do you process information? And how do you love people best? What's your style? How do you express emotion? Because everybody expresses emotion a bit differently. So it begins to help you understand that. And then it focuses on, are you more of a task-oriented person or a relationship-oriented person? Are you more of a structured person, or do you are more unstructured? So you fly by the seat of your pants. You're more spontaneous. You're not as highly organized as some people, and you're perfectly okay with that. And then are you more of a creative person, artistic, or very practical, detail, everything has to kind of make sense person? Or are you very much a big picture dreamer, or very much occupied with the details? And so you're really looking at kind of figuring out where you fit in all of those 6 different categories. That's kind of what a personality test does. So when it comes to play today, what we've realized is part of recovery is finding a balance between work and play. And that is so important for people coming out of complex trauma, because they've been in survival mode, which is really like work. And many were taught that work is what gives you validation. So you are always doing something to serve others, to work hard. And so to learn to rest is part 1, but then to learn to give yourself permission to play and explore is also very important. And so finding that balance is key for most people in recovery. And so what I encourage people to do is try different hobbies. Try learning new skills that you've kind of always wanted to do. Maybe fixing a car engine, maybe painting, maybe knitting, whatever. But try different skills. Some people try learning a new language. They take a course in their community about some topic that's always interested them. Just get yourself out there and then do different volunteer things. Volunteer at a pet shelter, volunteer in helping in different organizations that are getting off the ground, just to see what you're good at. All of those things become so important. And then the next things, I think, gradually begin to happen. Take time, and you can do this journaling, you can do this talking to somebody, but just exploring your own personal values, your beliefs, your preferences in music, your preferences in color and design, in travel, in dress, in hairstyles, all like just preferences apart from anybody's expectations. So that can become an important thing, just to kind of be introspective and thoughtful about, what do I believe? What do I value? What are my morals? All of those things. And then I think for most people, having a mentor, a therapist, a surrogate parent can be so helpful in this, because often they can see in you what you don't see in yourself. And they can say, wow, you're really good at that, and you didn't think you were. And they can encourage you. So they're an accurate mirror that's mirroring back to you an accurate picture of your personality, of your gifts and abilities. And then as you begin to understand yourself, begin to set boundaries to make sure that you're developing those areas where your passions are, so that you can develop it, so that you can pursue it. So again, this is a journey. You're not going to figure this out overnight, but I hope this gives you a few steps that get you started in learning this. And I'm going to add one final thing. We learn a lot about ourselves through hard times and failure. So learning about yourself isn't just being in this ideal situation, ideal environment where it's academic and it's quite easy. No, you learn some of your most important insights into who you are when life is the hardest. You learn tons of things about yourself through failure. So don't be afraid of that. Accept that as part of this self-discovery.